the difference between the material and the spiritual world. So he talks about, he introduces Arjun to the topic of there is yet another world that is unmanifest, and talks about some of the primary differences between the material and spiritual world. One of the primary differences is that everybody in the material world is going through the cycle of birth and death, and that's conspicuously absent in the spiritual world. So time as the agent of destruction is not there. Time is there in the spiritual world, but it is more as an agent of enjoyment. That in morning there are certain leelas, in the afternoon there are leelas, in night there are leelas. But time as we understand here in the material world, like they have different sayings about time, that time is the inevitable destroyer of everything, or nobody can conquer time, or everybody is defeated at the hands of time. And we see that there were great empires that came by, and they were destroyed. India is an example of that. At one point, Bharatvarsha, Srila Prabhupada said, was ruling the entire planet. And so this is the Vedic time. But even in historical times, we know that at one point what is in the current area of India was one of the richest countries in the world. So much so that it was everybody's goal was to somehow find a quick and expedient path to India. Everybody wanted to trade with India, and the kings that became powerful, they wanted to conquer India. And from that point to maybe a few decades ago, where India was known as the breadbasket of the world, it was so poor that any country that had any excess of food or grains, India was there, hands outstretched. And even though it's better now, but still there is widespread poverty. And other empires also, the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, the British Empire, they have all gone through these cycles of creation and destruction. And that's the effect of time. That it destroys civilizations, it destroys us. Every second we are pulled 1 second closer to our death. It's as we breathe, time is destroying us, and it's not there in the spiritual world. The other point that is different between the material and the spiritual world is that everybody in the material world is suffering. Krishna says that this is dukhalayam. This is a place of suffering. The degrees of suffering may be different. Some jivas may be suffering more, some jivas may be suffering less. The demigods, they lead opulent lives, they lead very long lives, and they drink the soma ras, and gives them power to enjoy tremendously. But they also suffer. In the scriptures we see how Indra, who is the king of the demigods, is under so much anxiety all the time that anytime you see somebody performing austerities, he gets worried that the person might steal his throne. And the asuras are constantly tormenting him. Sometimes he defeats the asuras, sometimes the asuras defeat him. And if you look at the Puranas, which are a lot of pastimes of the Devas, you see that within the Devas also there is a lot of turmoil that is going on. Even though they have godly powers, but like it is said that a powerful person has powerful enemies. So their enemies are also powerful. Sometimes they are inimical to each other. That Chandradev, he once got upset, so he kidnapped the wife of Brahaspati. And because of that, there was a big war, and a lot of people, a lot of destruction because of that. So now, so what to speak of the lower planets like Earth, where Dukhaliam is experienced on a day-to-day basis. Whether it's Adhyatmik, Adhidaivik, Adhibhautik, whether it's because of our mind, it's because of our body, or it's because of nature. We are suffering. And that's absent in the spiritual world. No suffering. Everybody is enjoying over there. So Krishna presents these two alternate destinations to Arjun, and he then speaks about the Sat Chakra Yoga. He speaks about the art of dying. That how one who is able to focus their life energies in the upper part, between the forehead and the crown of the head, who can fix the time of the death, and they can fix their destination also. So Krishna says, Antikale Chumameva Smarana Mukta Kaleva. That one who at the time of the death dies thinking of me, he will undoubtedly attain my nature. And the whole process of yoga, even though we see it as a process of maybe prolonging one's lifetime or attaining siddhis, so these are the secondary effects of yoga. That one prolongs one's lifetime because the process of yoga is so difficult. In the lifetime that we have, it is difficult to perfect the process of yoga. So the initial angas of yoga, they teach how to prolong one's lifetime. So there is sufficient time to practice yoga. And the siddhis are also their secondary effects. That as one's meditation on Krishna increases, just like an iron a rod that is placed in fire becomes fire, as one meditates more and more on Krishna, one acquires more and more qualities like Krishna. One acquires a nature like Krishna. And Krishna is the master of the mystics. So the jiva also begins to acquire the Ashtasiddhis. They can become smaller than the smallest, larger than the largest, lightest, heaviest. They can acquire anything they want, can travel at the speed of thought. So Krishna has all these qualities and much more, and the yogi also acquires these qualities. But the real purpose of the yoga is not this. The real purpose of the yoga is to fix one's mind on Krishna at the time of death. So Krishna has traveled with Arjun on this path, and he will, as Krishna does, that he gives Arjun. He shows Arjun the various alternative paths, and then he recommends a certain path. So now towards the end of the chapter, Krishna is now reaching a stage where he will say that even though there are many options that are available, I would recommend that you try this. So we will start from the verse 21. That which the Vedantas describe as unmanifest and infallible, that which is known as the supreme destination, that place from which, having attained it, one never returns, that is my supreme abode. So Krishna continues talking about the spiritual world. So important to notice that the word avyakta or unmanifest does not mean that the spiritual world is subtle. It does not mean that. So manifest means it's there, unmanifest means it's not there. That's one meaning of it. But here what Krishna means is that the spiritual world is unmanifest to the material eyes. Because somebody might say, like last week Prabhu was saying, if Krishna is there, then he should show himself to me. Otherwise, how do I believe? So Krishna is kind of anticipating that if 3/4 of the creation is spiritual, why don't we see it? Why can't we get on a plane and keep driving or keep flying until we hit the spiritual world? Or why hasn't anybody gone there and reported back that I went to the spiritual world and this is how it is? So it is unmanifest to the material eyes that one needs to be spiritually perfected to be able to see the spiritual world, and infallible. So infallible means that it is not destroyed by the influence of time or by any other influence. The material world is very fallible. The biggest destroyer in the material world is time, and there are many other factors also that destroy the material world. In a way, if you look at it, the material world, from the time that it is created, it has its own destruction built into it. It is created to be destroyed, just like we are. If you look at our bodies, we are created to be destroyed. And now that science is becoming more and more advanced, they are able to find out the mechanical workings of it. That how Laddu Gopal Prabhu knows more about it. I was reading this article about how the cancer cells are cells that are, in a way, they escape this mechanism of self-destruction. The cells are supposed to stop dividing after a certain age, and that's when we start declining, and ultimately we die. And the cancer cells, they, due to some mutation, they forget to stop dividing. So the title of the article was that cancer may hold the key to immortality. In a way that, you know.
Like autophagy, they call term.
Huh?
Autophagy.
Auto.
They go into that condition where they will die.
Yeah, there's something called the telomerase, which basically is a marker. That
divide the DNA into two, and then the two cells. One become two cells.
One becomes two cells.
That's how cancer grows.
Yeah. So when we get the cells, they are programmed that way. That at some point they'll stop dividing, we start aging, and then at some point we die. So the material world is created with its inevitable destruction already there. Not so in the spiritual world. There is no destruction there.
Because now one more research is going on how to stop aging. They're putting a lot of money on that. So they found some ways where your cells will not age rather than.
Right.
So you live longer than 100 years, like 150 to 100 years. So people are trying for it.
Yeah. I thought it was pretty ironical that the number one cause of death can also be the cause of immortality. So, any questions, comments?
One question came in mind is when we say like during the like Samudra Manthan, they got nectar and all the devas, they drank that nectar. So that means they become deathless, right? In that sense. So
well,
then
they are immune from premature death. So the life of the devas is 12,000 years of the devas. So they don't die earlier than that. Even when you see that there are battles, then the devas who are either hurt badly or they die, then in one of Indra's hand is nectar bearing. He has the nectar in his hand. So when he touches them with his hand, they come back to life. So we don't have a case where, you know, Indra dies prematurely but at the end of the life, in the third chapter, Prabhupada explains that the life of the devas is fixed, and so they know when the end of their lives are, and when the lives are nearing their end, then their wives and their companions, so the devas cannot have children because of the curse of Parvati Devi. So they don't have children, but they have wives. So then the devas see that as the wives realize that the lives of the husband is coming to an end, then they leave the husband at the time, and then everybody around them also leaves them. So then out of distress, the tears of the devas, they carry their soul, and then it falls as rain. It falls as rain, and then there is the cycle of the Purushartha, that from the rain comes the grain, from the grain is eaten, it becomes the semen, from the semen, then the devas, that's how the devas take birth on the earth planet there. But their death is definite. It's predestined. Anything else? Okay, we'll do the next verse. 22. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is greater than all, is attained by unalloyed devotion. Although he is present in the abode, he is all-pervading, and everything is situated within him. So we see now Krishna is trying to. So Krishna is now trying to guide Arjun to the path of bhakti. So he talked about the Satchakra yoga, of leaving the body through the process of elevating one's energy, and he talks about how one's next birth is determined by what one thinks at the time of death. But then he says that my devotees, they don't concern themselves with all this. He is attained by unalloyed devotion. So Ananya Bhakti is the one and only ticket to attain Krishna. Prabhupada in the purport writes that Krishna has talked about so many ways. He's talked about karma, he's talked about jnana, he's talked about astan, Satchakra yoga, and they are all valid means to attain Krishna. But they are valid only if they eventually lead to bhakti. So the potency of these processes is that in every process there is an element of bhakti. And as one practices that process more and more, the component of bhakti becomes more and more prominent. So one may practice karma initially as karmakant, that very, very materialistically, that I want to have a long life, I want to have a beautiful wife, a suitable progeny. So they may practice it just materialistically. But then how do you practice karmakant? You practice it based on the instructions on the Vedas. So as one practices karmakant, when one gets the result that is promised in the Vedas, then one begins to think that this Vedas, they hold, what else do they hold? What can they tell me that is perhaps even more than karmakant? So then from karmakant they may go to jnana, from jnana they may go to astan, from astan they may go to bhakti. But essentially what it is establishing is one's relationship with the Vedas. It's like if you go to a doctor, you may have just a cold and a cough, and you go to the doctor and he says take this and it gets cured, then your faith in the doctor is established. Later on, even for a more serious illness, you will say, I have faith in this doctor. Then you go back to the doctor again and again. And as he gives you even more difficult instructions to follow, then you will think in your mind that in the past, when I followed his instructions, I became healthy, so will I become healthy now. So all the processes will one way or the other increase our faith in Krishna. When we practice Jnana, we begin to understand the nature of everything. What is Atma? What are the 24 elements in the material creation? In the creation, 23 elements, 24th is not material. So what are the elements over there? How do we distinguish between the two? And then you start seeing that it makes sense. And then you say, okay, this is a book of knowledge that is accurate, that is guiding me in the right direction. What else is there? You practice astan. You start seeing the siddhis coming. And then you say, okay, this process is accurate. What else do the Vedas? Okay. Ultimately, the Vedas will guide you to the Vedanta. So Vedanta is where all the Vedic knowledge ends. And the Vedanta is that Ishvara Parama Krishna. That Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Srila Prabhupada said that one must understand, I was talking to his disciples, that you all have perfected the process of karma and jnana and astanga in your previous lifetimes. That is why you have taken to Krishna consciousness. That is why you are naturally disinclined to this process and naturally attracted to chanting of the holy names. So he would say that you should not take yourself and others casually. You should understand that you were all great sages, great jnanis, great munis, great kings in your previous lives who have perfected the various aspects, the various angas of bhakti before you have become attracted to Shuddha Bhakti. And we see that also as we practice our Krishna consciousness, we see that some people take to it, some people don't. It's the same philosophy, it's the same practices, and some people are naturally inclined to it. And they say, you say chant, they say, okay, fine, chanting. Krishna is God, okay, Krishna is God. So it's not that they are gullible, it's not that they are they're easily being misguided. It's because they've already been purified in their hearts. And that's why their hearts are fertile to the seed of bhakti here. So Krishna is saying that one who is, so the key word over here is unalloyed devotee. So at this point Krishna is talking about a person whose bhakti is not mishrit, whose bhakti is not mixed with karma, jnana, astanga, etc. So sometimes Prabhupada will give the example of if you go to the palace of a king, and in ancient times, all the roads in the cities would go to the palace of the king. So you can come through any one of the roads, but there is a single door and there is a single passage to the palace. So you may take any door, any passage, but then you have to go through the single door and that single passage. So similarly, you may approach Krishna initially through any one of the many methods, but finally to see Krishna, there is only one and only one way, which is bhakti. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada describes a little bit about the spiritual world, and he says in the Brahma Samhita, also confirms that although the Lord is always in the supreme abode Golok Vrindavan, he is all pervading. So that everything is going on nicely. Goloka evan nivastate akil atma bhuta. And I wanted to read a few verses from Brahma Samhita which describe the spiritual world, and it helps us contrast it also to the material. And so we have recited Brahma Samhita several times, so you must be familiar with it. So this is verse 29 from chapter 5 of Brahma Samhita. Chintamani prakarasad nashukalpa vriksha laksha vradeshu surabhiya vipalayantam lakshmi sahasra satasam brahma sevyamanam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor, who is tending the cows, yielding all desires, in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purple trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds and thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. So this verse talks about the opulence of the spiritual world. So if you notice, it talks about that all the stones, the grains in the spiritual world are Chintamani. So Chintamani are gems that will relieve you of all kinds of distress and fulfills all your desires. That's why they're called Chintamani. So Chintamani are also in certain pastimes is mentioned that how different people pursued that there are Chintamani stones on the earth and how people would pursue the search for the Chintamani. But Rupa Goswami, he had a Chintamani. He had a Chintamani with him. And once a person heard about it, that Rupa Goswami had a Chintamani, he was very poor. So he thought that, and Rupa Goswami was Babaji. He was just sitting under a tree and chanting, and he would barely eat enough that would fill his palm. So he said, what will you do with this stone? So he went to him and he said, I heard you have a Chintamani. He said, yes. And he said, can you give it to me? And he said, you see that pile of rubbish over there? The Chintamani is somewhere over there. I said, okay. He went over there, he saw the Chintamani, took it with him, went away. But this person was very fruitive by nature. So while he was going, he said that he was thinking that this person, he gave away this precious Chintamani so easily. So definitely has something more than this. So he went back to Rupa Goswami and he said, Babaji, you gave the Chintamani to me so easily, so you definitely have something that is more potent than this Chintamani. Rupa Goswami said, yes. And he said, give it to me. And he said, I will give it to you, but under one condition. He said, what? He said, you take this Chintamani and you throw it into the river. So he did not hesitate. He said, I'm getting something more than what. So he went and threw the Chintamani. He says, now give me. And then Rupa Goswami, he gave him bhakti. And he never regretted it. So, but in the spiritual world, each and every stone, the fabric of Chintamani, of spiritual world is desire fulfilling stones. That is the fabric of the spiritual world. We had already, when we were talking about the pastimes of Lord Nityananda, we said that Nityananda Prabhu is Lord Balram, and Lord Balram is the manifester of the spiritual world. So the spiritual world is fully sentient. Every stone, every pebble over there is sentient. And every stone, every pebble is able to fulfill all your desires. Now, if that was not enough, every tree is a Kalpavriksha tree. So Kalpavriksha tree has that ability that you touch the tree and then you ask for anything. The tree fulfills your desire. So I remember when we went to Mayapur, we went to Mamgachi. Mamgachi has a very old temple over there. And there's Babaji who is serving, so the deities over there are Radha Madan Gopal. A very interesting story that he had, his Guru Maharaj had asked him to serve the deities when he was 7 years old. And he's now in his late 80s and he has been serving without fail since the time over there. And then he has many stories. He was telling us a story. He speaks Bengali, so we couldn't understand most of what he was saying. But he's very enthusiastic. He tells, so you can get a little bit of what he was saying. That how at one point, this was early years. Now the temple is kind of opulent because a lot of his devotees go there. They give a lot of donations over there. They said, how at one point the temple was in the middle of a thick jungle. And he had reached a point where there was nothing to offer to the deities. And then he was very, very sad. He was praying to the deities that make some arrangements. And then he said at the time, he said a young boy came with a bullock cart. And in the bullock cart was loaded with all very, very fresh and fragrant vegetables. And what he does even to this day is that you take any vegetables to offer, he will right then and there cook it, offer to the deities and offer it to you. And we were so embarrassed because he's very old. He's like bent over. His back is broken, or maybe because of old age.
Oh, his back is broken because once he was climbing the tree in that yard to pluck, I think, some mango or something, and he fell. He broke his back, and since then he's half dead.
Yeah. He's like his body is like 90 degrees of
Yeah.
bend. But he starts getting angry if you say that, no Babaji, I'm going. He says, sit down, don't move. And then he will go there and he'll cook and cook fresh over there, and he'll serve you himself. He'll make sure that he'll serve you.
And he doesn't save anything for himself.
Yeah. He'll serve everything.
So
So right then and there. He lets you assist him in the cooking. But he'll do the cooking, he'll offer to the deities, he'll serve you. So the tree that is there in his yard, maybe probably a picture is, he says it's a kalpavriksha tree. And it's a very interesting tree that the tree has the trunk is completely hollow. It has no xylem, nothing inside it. It's a completely hollow tree. But it's such a luxuriant, it's tall, it's got big crown, big leaves. And then he said, you go and touch the tree and ask for anything. And then when we were going to touch the tree, he said that only ask for Krishna Bhakti. He wanted to make sure that we don't ask for cars and he only ask for Krishna Bhakti. It's a big tree. So the Kalpavriksha trees like that, millions in the spiritual world. And the cows, the Surabhi cows there, so they are Kamdhenu cows. So the cows, they are fulfilling all desires. That's why cows have such a special place in Vaishnava culture, because Krishna's planet, you don't see, they may be, but you don't see bears and tigers and elephants. But Krishna's planet is inundated with Kamdhenu cows. Kamdhenu cows are also cows that will fulfill all your desires. And if that is not sufficient, then Krishna's planet is full of Lakshmi Devis. So in the material world we have one Lakshmi Devi, and everybody worships to her, saying, give us wealth, give us opulence, give us good fortune. But there are billions and billions of goddess of fortune, and they are ready to bestow all kind of good fortune. Every resident in the spiritual world, every time they touch the Chintamani, every time they touch the Kalpavriksha, every time they touch the Kamudhenus, every time they worship the Lakshmi Devis, they only ask for one thing. That is, how can I better serve Krishna and his devotees? Okay. Okay. Any questions?
One question. I think in Isha Upanishad there's a verse approximately the same about Krishna is in his abode but he's everywhere. I think it's text 6. The verse is the same.
Yeah, so the second part of the verse, where he is present in the abode, he is all pervading and everything is situated with him, it answers that implicit question that Arjun might ask, that the spiritual world it's so nice, and that is Krishna's abode. So that means if he's there in the spiritual world, then he's not there in the material world. So are we to assume that the material world is devoid of Krishna? And Krishna, he answers that implicit question, saying no. Even though he is in the spiritual world, he is everywhere. He is in the material world, he is in Brahmaloka, he is in Patanloka, he is in Bhulok, he is everywhere. And that is Krishna's potency, that he can be here and he can be there also. But Krishna's residence is there in the Krishna Loka. Srila Prabhupada would say that in Vaishnava religion, we tell you everything about God. We tell you what he looks like, we tell you his parents' name, we tell you the name of his girlfriend, we tell you where he lives, we describe his daily activities from morning to evening, we tell you what he likes, what he does not like, and that's what makes it complete. That we don't settle for the notion of God being some kind of a light or a power or some kind of an energy somewhere in the distance. If you come and ask us who God is, we will tell you exactly who God is, how is He look, how does He look, what does He do, how can you become friends with Him. He said that's what makes Vaishnava religion so complete. Verse 23. O best of the Bharats, I shall now explain to you the different times at which, passing away from this world, the yogi does or does not come back. So you see that there is a little bit of a back and forth over here, and there's a reason. That in the previous verse, Krishna said that my devotees, they don't have to worry about anything. Just by the power of devotion, they will come to me. And now he speaks about those who are not his Ananya Bhaktas, about those who are taking shelter of one of the lower processes. What happens to them? And you will see that he brackets it. That when he talks about this process, before that he talks about the potency of bhakti, after that he will talk about the potency of bhakti. But he still puts this in for the sake of completeness. He wants to make sure that we also understand that there are options. But he does not want us to pursue it. It's like somebody comes to you and says that, how do I improve my health? And the person says, you can do this, and you can do this, but you should do this. So other two options are also there, but clearly the person is saying that this is the best way to do it. So that's how Krishna is explaining. So even this process of Satchakra Yoga, of giving up one's life based on one's desires, it's a bona fide Vedic process. But Krishna is wanting to make sure that we understand that much superior to that is the path of devotional service. Those who know the Supreme Brahman attain the Supreme by passing away from the world during the influence of the fiery god, in the light, at an auspicious moment of the day, during the fortnight of the waxing moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels to the north. So these are the times that are auspicious for passing away. And Prabhupada in Advaita Purport, Prabhupada explains that when fire, light, day and the fortnight of the moons are mentioned, it is to be understood that over all of them there are presiding deities who make arrangements for the passage to the soul. So each of these occurrences are presided by a deity. And when the soul passes away at this auspicious time, then these deities take the soul by the hand and take it to the either to the higher planetary system or to beyond the material world. At the time of death, the mind carries one on the path to a new life. If one leaves the body at the time designated above, either accidentally or by arrangement, it is possible for him to attain the impersonal Brahmajyoti. So, leaving the body at an auspicious time, Prabhupada says either one who through the process of yoga has controlled their life airs to the point that they determine the time of death, or accidentally, agyat sukriti, or accidentally, then they attain the impersonal Brahmajyoti. So, even though the impersonal Brahmajyoti is beyond the realm of the material world, but there is one thing that is lacking over there, and that is Krishna. Krishna is not there. When Krishna is not there, his devotees are not there. His pastimes are not there. His Leela is not there. So that is why it is known as impersonal. So impersonal Brahmajyoti is the effulgence of Krishna's body. And one who enters the impersonal Brahmajyoti kind of enters into a stage of neutrality. that they don't enjoy, but they don't suffer. Because enjoyments only comes out of relationships. And when we have relationships, in the relationships we see Krishna Leela, that sometimes he's quarreling with the devotees, sometimes he's playing with them, sometimes he has different rasas, sometimes he's conspiring with them to trouble his mother, sometimes he's stealing from them. And you also see different, different aspects of the relationships that are happening. But each of those aspects, they're beautiful because they enrich us. Even if, and it's a little hard for us to imagine, but even if we enter into a kind of a life where everything was perfect, that everybody was polite to you, everybody did what you expected them to do, everybody was happy with the way things are going on, it would actually not be very satisfying. Because what's that saying? That variety is the spice of life, right? So you need some variety, right? You need your wife to get upset at you sometime. You need your husband to get upset. You need your children.
That, right?
You need your children to sometimes, if you think about this, your children were always like, yes dad, yes mom, yes dad, yes mom. You would say like, my God, get me a real child. You need children who are naughty, who sometimes disobey you, sometimes obey you. That's what makes the relationship really sweet. It makes it really enjoyable. And that's there in the spiritual world. That's there. In Brahma Jyoti, there are no relationships. Everybody is there in their own Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So that's what. So even though the Shat Chakra Yoga is very difficult to practice, but the destination of this is not fully satisfying.
Question. So the Brahma Jyoti is kind of a planet, or is just where they are staying?
It's not a planet. Prabhupada says that Krishna's effulgence.
So because these are unmanifested, so they just kind of hang in. But there has to be some land to stay, right?
They're just souls, they're souls. They don't have a body. So they're souls. Souls can exist anywhere, but they're beyond the material world. The first contact between the material and the spiritual world is the Brahma Jyoti. So that's where they exist.
So you mean a layer?
It's a regional layer. It's a little difficult to ascribe this in this notion of dimensions in the spiritual world. It's a little difficult. In Brahma Samhita, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in one of the purports, he tries to explain it a little bit, that how the spiritual world is organized. That it's like a lotus flower. At the center of the lotus is Krishna Loka, and then there are the different planets. Surrounding the different planets are Vaikuntha planets. Surrounding that is the Brahma Jyoti. And then after that is the material world. So closest to us would be like, if somebody just hanging out up in the space. Even though it's not a full description, but something like somebody just hanging out in the space. There's no land, there's no air, there's no water. They're just hanging out over there. But they're perfectly peaceful. They're happy. But they miss out relations. Prabhupada says that because there are no relationships, ultimately the denizens of the Brahma Jyoti, they come down looking for relationships. And when they come down, they typically take on the role of being great philanthropists. Because when they realize that this is what they're missing on, they want to invest everything in that. So they work for the benefit of humanity, they give in charity, they work in different aspects to help other people. But essentially what they're doing is they're quenching their desire for relationships here in the material world.
Getting into any other loka in the spiritual world, is it more difficult than getting into Brahman Jyoti? Because you say that they come down. Why don't they go up and go to other planets?
Why don't they go up? It's difficult because in Brahma Jyoti there is no opportunity to do bhakti. So it's difficult from there. But Prabhupada says that people who fall from the Brahma Jyoti will, if they get the mercy of a devotee, they are very inclined to take to bhakti. That's one reason also, like even in the material world, in the higher planets, like in the planets of the demigods, difficult to take to bhakti because very little suffering and so much of enjoyment. So even though they are much more elevated than us, and they are much more aware of the presence of Krishna. In fact, they have interactions with Krishna. We see so many times Indra going and praying to Krishna that come and help me. So they have direct empirical interactions with Krishna. But the mood of enjoyment over there is so strong. So that is why they said that the middle planetary systems, there is a good mixture of suffering and enjoyment, so that one understands. So if there is only suffering, then one will never know what enjoyment is. But there is a good mixture of suffering and enjoyment that one understands that they are suffering, and that provides an impetus to look for better, look for more. Okay.
The intelligence of Brahman, like there are also multiple living entities are there. Is their free will does not allow them to try for a relationships there?
Amongst one another?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that. Apparently the Brahman, it's because whenever Brahma Jyoti is described, it's described as an impersonal Brahma Jyoti, Sayujya Mukti.
Sure.
It is impersonal. So, so at least the mood over there is no personal relationships there. And perhaps when they're trying to get personal relationships, that's when they come down to the material world. And because they're much more advanced than us, because they have been able to escape the cycle of birth and death and go there, and because their mood was that they wanted peace, they didn't want to get involved in the cycle of relationships, etc. So they went to the Brahma Jyoti, and they still have free will, and their free will is much more than ours. So when they desire relationships, that's when they come down, and that's why they have this Shakti, that when they come down as very powerful living entities. They take birth as kings or great sages or great thinkers, and they do work for the welfare of the world. And like Prabhupada says that if they get the mercy of a devotee, then they immediately take to bhakti.
Do the Buddhists fall in the category of the persons? I think the Nirvana stage is what proper.
Buddhists are a little different. The followers of Sripad Shankaracharya, the Advaitists, they fall in the category of Brahmavadis. The Buddhists are Shunyavadis. So what they see is not even supported in the scriptures. What they say is that the perfection of one's life is annihilation. That when the soul is perfect, then it ceases to exist. That one comes from nothing and goes into nothing.
Which means that they don't believe in reincarnation?
They do believe in reincarnation, but only as a stepping stone. So they say that as long as the soul is conditioned, it will go through this cycle of repeated birth and death. They believe in a lot of the tenets of Hinduism. They believe in repeated birth and death, going to different planetary systems. They believe in all that. But what they say is that the end goal is that one becomes nihilistic, one becomes completely destroyed. They don't explain how the soul comes out of nothingness. They don't explain that how it's like the Big Bang theory of the universe, right? That it says that the universe comes out of singularity. But where the singularity comes from, they don't explain, right? And then they say the universe will go into the singularity. But how that singularity will cease to exist, they don't talk about that. So, the advantage of Vaidism, of course, is at least the one who was inclined in that way, is that if you don't exist, then you will never suffer. There is no suffering, right? If you don't exist, then there is no suffering. nirvana. That
Yes,
you're free of
they
everything.
call it like, who am I? Try to search yourself. And when you ask this question to yourself, who am I? You will not find any answer.
Right.
Who's going to say?
Right.
So there says this zero.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's nothing. So no mind
Right, right.
area. And there's no mind itself.
Yeah, yeah. I think
So
that's the
everything is
highest.
false,
That's the
yes.
highest level. It's the neti, neti, neti.
Nothing.
That who am I? Am I this body? No.
No.
Am I my mind? No. Am I the soul? No.
No.
Who am I? Neti. That Your
Voidism.
Void.
your void. Your void is still there.
But Buddha is one of the incarnations of Krishna.
He's the incarnation of Krishna, and he came for a specific purpose, because before Lord Buddha, the way, so in order for Lord Buddha to propone this theory, he had to reject the Vedas, because the Vedas is all based on the notion of the existence of the soul. So in order to reject the soul, you have to reject the Vedas. So it is explained that before Lord Buddha came, the Vedas were misinterpreted and misfollowed. So it's just like it's like you build a house, and you build a nice house, people are living, and then over time the house becomes decrepit, and the walls are falling apart, and the plumbing is gone, and everything is falling. So it's difficult to rebuild the house. The best thing to do at the time is to destroy the house and build it again. So Lord Buddha came with this mission of destroying the house. So he destroyed the scriptures, and then Sripad Shankaracharya came and he started building the house again. And so it was a service as an incarnation of Krishna. That was a service to gradually reintroduce us to the Vedas. The mystic who passes away from this world during the smoke, the night, the fortnight of the waning moon, or the 6 months, when the sun passes to the south, reaches the moon planet, but again comes back. Srila Prabhupada says, in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Kapila Muni mentions that those who are expert in fruitive activities and the sacrificial methods on earth attain the moon at death. These elevated souls live on the moon for 10,000 years by demigod calculation and enjoy the life by drinking somaras. They eventually return to earth. This means that on the moon there are higher classes of living beings, though they may not be perceived by gross senses. So the earlier, the mystic in the earlier verse were the yogis, and the mystic in this verse are the karmkandis. And the karmkandis, they pass at this particular. See, these are again the deities. So they pass under the influence of the deities, and then they go to Chandralok. And in Chandralok, they drink somaras and they enjoy a life that is 10,000, 12,000 years by the demigod calculation. But when the time passes away, then they come back to the planet. So unlike the mystics in the previous verse, who can stay there forever if they want, the mystics in this verse, they're forced to come back. They don't have a choice. When their life ends, they're forced to come back. But while they are living, they enjoy a godly life. So in one of the Puranas, the potency of somaras is described. That one who drinks somaras can the senses become heightened. It almost looked like a drug to me, but it's a demigods. So the senses become heightened. The ability to enjoy is magnified several times over. The length by which one can enjoy becomes very, 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 very long.
One question.
Yes, Prabhu.
So, to attain Krishna, one has to come back to material world, because it seems when one is performing his bhakti, he may not attain to Krishna. Let's say he goes to some planetary system, but from there he's not able to make advancement, so he'll fall down and then he'll go back if he qualifies in his bhakti.
So these are not the destination of devotees. These destinations that have been given, they're the destination. So they are devotees in the sense they're practicing Mishrit Bhakti, but they are not Ananya Bhaktas. So these are people whose meditation is like the second verse is Karam Kandis. Explicitly they want to perform fruitive activities, or they are yogis. They want to perform yogis. But devotees, they don't have to go through these cycles. The destination of the devotees is completely dependent on the devotees, on the will of the devotees. So even if they may not have perfected their bhakti, they will go wherever they want to go. So in the I think it's in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu it is said that devotees aspire to take birth in the family of devotees. So that's their desire. So as they practice devotional service, maybe in one lifetime they don't perfect it. But when they die, then the desire is that let me take birth in the family of devotees. So Srila Prabhupada, in one of the purports in the Bhagavatam, he writes about it himself in mood of humility. And he says that I was fortunate enough to take birth in a Vaishnava family, which means that in my previous lives I had also pursued the process of bhakti, which gave me the opportunity to take birth in a devotee family. And then to his disciples also, Prabhupada used to be very heavy, saying that you have to understand that your children are no ordinary souls. They have taken birth in the family of a devotee because they themselves are great devotees. And just they want to complete the process of bhakti. So what better way than to take, because if you're born in a family of devotee, even before you're born, you're practicing devotional service. In the womb of the mother, they're listening to Krishna Katha, they're listening to the mother chanting. At the time of conception, Garbhodah Samskar, it's done by the mercy of Vishnu and Vaishnava. From the time that they are born, Jati Samskar, everything is Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. So it's a great opportunity. A lot of us, we took to Krishna consciousness later on by the mercy of some other devotee. Somebody came and gave us mercy. We came across some book by Srila Prabhupada, and then we took to bhakti. But the children of devotees, they're born. They don't even have that. They don't even have to make that extra endeavor, which is true, right? So that's what makes them special. Or if the devotees want, they can take birth anywhere. They can go to higher planets if they want, so whatever they want. So, for devotees, it's completely up to them. In the Mahabharata, when after the Pandavas die, then so the pastime that they first go to the hellish planet, and then after that they go to the heavenly planet. And then the Pandavas, they ask Indra that what is there in store for us? And Indra says, I don't know. It's all up to you. You're beyond my jurisdiction. You're Krishna Sakhas. So there's nothing that I can tell you. Whatever you want, you have. So that's the destination of the devotees. Anything else? According to the Vedic opinion, there are two ways of passing from this world, one in light, one in darkness. When one passes in light, he does not come back. When one passes in darkness, he returns. So this is the distinction between the yogis and the karmis. The yogis go to Brahmajyoti and they don't have to come back. And the karmis, they go to Chandralok and they're forced to come back. Although the devotees know these two paths, O Arjun, they are never bewildered. Therefore, be always fixed in devotion. So this is the ending bracket of Krishna. So he spoke about his Ananya Bhaktas. He spoke about the two ways that people can leave the planet. Now, this does not include, so one should not think that I will fall in one of these two categories. So this does not include people who are doing sinful activities, does not include people who are not following the Vedic injunctions. For them there is a different destination. They may go to hellish planets, they may go to lower planetary system, or they may go to lower life forms. This is the destination of those who are aspiring for something higher, either through karma or yoga. So there is these two destinations, and then Krishna ends up by saying same point that he made at the beginning, that the devotees don't worry about these two. Any time that a devotee dies, it's an auspicious time. Prabhupada in the purport writes that his spiritual master Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that anywhere that a devotee goes, it's Vrindavan. Why? Because Vrindavan is there, where Krishna is there, and Krishna's devotees are there. Because the devotees always carry Krishna in their heart. Anywhere they goes, there is a Krishna and his devotees. So, it is Vrindavan. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing austere sacrifices, giving in charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end, he reaches the supreme eternal goal. It's an important verse. Prabhupada has a fairly long purport, and this is the last verse of the chapter, which kind of gives the essence of what Krishna wants to say, that one should not think that the process of bhakti is exclusive to karma or jnana or astham. All of them are subsumed within the process of bhakti. One of the analogy that Prabhupada would often give was that bhakti is a 100 rupee note. It contains the 10 rupee, the 20 rupee, the 5 rupee, the 50 rupees. They're all contained automatically. If you have 100 rupees, you automatically have all of them. So here Krishna mentions that he is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas. So essentially, this verse, in a way, is talking about the Varnashram system. So in the Varnashram system, when a person is born, when he is young, as a brahmachari, his main preoccupation is study of the Vedas. So they go to the Gurukul, they take shelter of a spiritual master, and they study the Vedas. So this is the brahmachari ashram, that studying the Vedas, performing austere sacrifices or giving in charity. This is the duties of a grahastha. Because in grahastha life, there is a lot of license for enjoyment. You can enjoy conjugal pleasures, you can enjoy the pleasures of having a family, of enjoying a status in the society. You can enjoy opulent lives. It's okay for grahasthas to build a house, to have to eat nice food, to live a comfortable life. But something has to compensate for it. So how do the grahasthas compensate for it? The main dharma of the grahastha is giving charity. Because the other ashrams, they don't earn any money. The brahmacharis are studying, the other sannyasis are traveling and begging, vanaprasthas are living in the forest. So they all are supported by the grahasthas. So the duty of the grahastha is to give in charity. And then they perform the yagyas because they are the only one with wealth. They perform the yagyas. So perform yagyas require a lot of wealth. You need, at least the Vedic yagyas, you need gold, you need qualified brahmans. Some of those yagyas, even during the earlier times, when Maharaj Dashrath wanted to do the Putra Kameshi yagya, or he invited who did he invite? Who?
Rishyasrangamani?
No, he did the son-in-law of the son of Vibandak, the son-in-law of Romaharshan. I forget his name. I know. For some reason, I remember his family lineage, but not his name. So the husband of Shanta, wife's name was Shanta. So he invited him, and he came in, and he said that in order to perform this yajna, it will take you 1 year to prepare. And this is Maharaj Dashrath, emperor with unlimited opulences. But for 1 year, he and his ministers worked feverishly to prepare for that yajna. So the duty of the Grahasthas is to perform the yajna through which the demigods are propitiated. So this is the Grahastha ashram. Then pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. So this is what happens during Vanaprastha and Sannyas. That during Vanaprastha one begins so the part of the Vedas that are meant for the Vanaprastha and the Sannyas are the Upanishads. And so the Vedas are divided in 4 parts. They are the Brahmanyas, Samhitas, Aranyakas and Upanishad. So the Brahmanas are for the Brahmacharis, the Samhitas are for the Grahasthas, the Aranyakas are for the Vanaprasthas, and the Upanishads are for the Sannyasis. So they start, initially you do it. You do it because the Vedas ask you to do it. The Upanishads then start explaining why do you do it. Initially it is more of a what and a how. That what do you do and how you do it. But as you become more advanced, the Upanishads begin to explain to you why do you do it. What is the whole purpose of this? What is the purpose of creation? Who is God? Who are you? What is the relationship? The way this material world is run. So Krishna is saying that one who practices bhakti does not have to follow the varnashram dharma. That one who is practicing bhakti, he does not have to follow karam kand or gyan kand or astanga yoga, because each of these are also one of the paths. The fruitive activities is karam kand, philosophical inquiry is gyan kand, astanga yoga is by performing austerities. So bhakti, it transcends the need to follow the process of varnashram. And this verse is especially suitable for us because in the age of Kali, varnashram has ceased to exist. That there is no varna and there is no ashram. Right? Kalau Shudra Sambhavati. In the Srimad Bhagavatam it is said, in this age of Kali, everybody is a Shudra. So, regardless of what they may say, somebody might say, I'm Chaturvedi, I'm Trivedi, or whatever it is. Once I was having lunch with a colleague of mine, and so he knew that I was inclined to this, and so he says that, I come from a long family of Brahmins. He was Marathi, so he said, I'm Kavishwar, and Kavishwar are like high quality Brahmins, and he was eating a hamburger sitting over there. So then I didn't say it because he was much senior to me in the organization. It might have affected my career path over there. I was just thinking about Prabhupada saying that Brahman is a name only. So everybody is a Shudra by birth. One becomes a Brahman by going through the purificatory, the samskars. And they go through the Upnayan samskar, they take shelter of the Guru, when they learn, then they become Vijas, they get the second birth. And through different practices they become Brahmans. But it's not there, not enough qualified priest, not enough access to the scriptures. So this is especially applicable to us in the age of Kali, that we don't have access to an ashram system. We don't have access to Karam Kand, Gyan Kand, or Astanga. But Krishna says that one who takes to bhakti does not have to worry about it. So behind this so-called curse is a benediction also. That we may not have access to it, but we have access to something that is infinitely more potent and superior, that does not require all this pre-qualification. Bhakti is available to anybody and everybody. Tatyenu kampam sukshamano. Srimad Bhagavatam it is said that one who worships Krishna, then For him, and the verse speaks very strongly that one who worships Krishna, patiently waiting for his mercy to appear, while tolerating all the trials and tribulations, for him going back to Krishna becomes his birthright, which means that even Krishna cannot stop you at that time. I mean, of course, Krishna can do anything, but Krishna becomes so benevolently inclined to such a person that even Krishna will not stop you. So that's the potency of bhakti. So in a way, the age of Kali is the most degraded age, but the fortunate people in the age of Kali who take to the process of bhakti are much more fortunate than the sages in the age of in Satyug, much more fortunate than the great munis who would perform meditation, or the great priests who would perform yagyas, or who would worship would worship in the temples. And especially in this particular age of Mahaprabhu has given us the easy and quick way of simply chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra and being careful not to offend devotees, to worship the deities, do honor prasadam. So the easy way. Think about it, that compared to standing 60,000 years on your toe with your hands upraised and chanting 16 rounds a day. Like I chant, I go to the basement, I switch on my fireplace, I chant in the comfort of my room, and just today morning I was chanting and I was thinking that at least I don't have to stand out in the cold with my hands upraised, and then I'll make a little bit of advancement, and not just for one day, not just for 1 month or a year, for thousands and thousands of years, and then you get something that is still not the summum bonum, still not the ultimate destination. So that's the end of the chapter. I'll stop here and see if there is any question.
Question, you just said that for our bhakti process, the system of varnashram doesn't need to be in place, right? Then why is there so much talk in our organization about bringing in the varnashram and having the system online because it works and blah blah blah?
There are two schools of thoughts on this. There is what is considered to be Devi Varnashram. So Devi Varnashram is, you go through the semblance of Varnashram, but the focus of Varnashram is to increase bhakti. So when a person is at the stage of Brahmacharya, then they read the Bhagavad Gita, the Srimad Bhagavatam, they understand the scriptures that lead one to Krishna. When one is Grahastha, then they support the temple, they worship the deities. In Devi Varnashram, the primary duty of a Grahastha is to serve the Vaishnavas. So then that becomes Devi Varnashram. In the Vanaprastha, the primary duty becomes one of preaching. One travels and preaches. Similarly, sannyas, the primary duty becomes one of taking on disciples and teaching them the science of Krishna consciousness. So when we speak about Varnashram in the context of ISKCON, then what is spoken about? There's a seminar on Varnashram in Gita Nagari that Dr. Maharaj had arranged. Then you'll see that the focus over there is Devi Varnashram. So there are three kinds of Varnashram. There's Karma Varnashram, Gyan Varnashram, and Devi Varnashram. And depending on where one wants to go, the Varnashram system is adjusted accordingly.
Devi stands for, I think...
Devi is divine. It just means that, not Devi, is Devi.
Devi, yeah.
Devi. So Devi stands for divine. It's that it's focused around how can one go back to Godhead. Anything else?
The point that Mataji is talking, the Varnashram that we wanted to implement, there we wanted to have the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra also.
There is, Prabhupada says that, and again, it's again centered to Krishna. Prabhupada says that the different varnas, they are intrinsic within us. Now, of course, he negates this notion of one being born in a varna, that nobody is born a Brahman, Kshatriya. But he says, depending on the modes of material nature that we acquire, we could be Brahman, Vaishya, Kshatriya, or Shudra. But then he makes the same point, that depending on our propensity, we serve Krishna accordingly. The Brahmanas can become priests, the Kshatriyas can be the administrators, they can manage the temples, they can protect the deities, the Vaishyas can do commerce. And practically speaking, if you see the life of the disciples of Prabhupada,